Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Mecha Ace Evil Run. Episode 5 Against the Might of the Empire, the Fall of Vedria Prime. Orbit over Vedria Prime, Vedria System. 16 hours later. Lieutenant Commander Capek, taking off! The acceleration of the launch catapult punches you back as your mecha is flung forward from the Caliburn's hangar into the blackness of space. You move your machine forward slowly, giving the rest of your lance the time they need to launch from your carrier and form up behind you. As you wait for Sadie and the others to launch, you take a glance at your rear at the convoy of evacuation vessels still assembling behind the planet's defenders. On board are hundreds of thousands of civilians, government officials, colonial militia, anti-imperial activists and their families, anyone whose lives might be endangered should the Imperials take the planet. It is your objective to defend those transports by any means necessary. No. Orders from Fleet Command have ruled that Vedria itself is to be abandoned to the enemy. At least you won't be fighting this battle alone. The Caliburn and her consorts are assembled and ready for battle behind you. Most of the Codex warships are converted merchant vessels and passenger liners. The colonies have had neither the time nor the resources to build a fleet of dedicated warships, but their hastily installed armor will still do its job, and their missile tubes are more than capable of lending you support in battle. Then there's the formation of allied combat armatures assembled in front of you and the warships of the Codex Task Force, the 3 dozen or so launched from the light carriers which accompanied and supported the Caliburn during the last battle. Together, they form a protective wall in front of the Codex ships, with a large hole in the center reserved for you and your elite Zaft lance. Beyond them is the enemy. Await the enemy. The Imperial force is a sight to behold. The first ranks are made up of swarms of smaller, lighter warships, each a quarter of the size of the Caliburn, combat armature destroyers, each armed with light quick-firing guns. By themselves, their thin armor makes them easy prey. In groups, they are deadly, capable of warding off attacking mecha with a wall of fire. Behind the destroyers sit the point defense cruisers, large, heavier vessels, each bristling with counter-missile launchers designed to protect the rest of the enemy fleet from any capital missile ships fired by your own side's ships. Ugh. Then at the center sits the dozen blocky gray iron shapes of the enemy battleships, dreadnoughts more than a kilometer long, each capable of launching immense volleys of missiles, each protected by dozens of quick-firing point defense guns and meters-thick slabs of armor. To the rear and to the flanks lay the ungainly shapes of the Imperial cruisers, carriers, dozens of them. These ships are lightly armed and poorly armored, but you know each is capable of carrying a full lance of Imperial combat armatures. Lastly, behind the rest of the Imperial force sits an immense egg-shaped object, easily 10 or 15 times the size of the largest enemy capital ship. Perhaps it is a mobile shipyard or supply base. Whatever it is far to the rear, out of reach, and the Imperials show no intention of changing that state of affairs. The whole setup is a classic Imperial battle formation, one that has been used and reused by enemy commanders since the beginning of war. It is a formation designed for brutal, bloody slugging matches, or when an Imperial fleet plans on grinding a determined opponent into nothing. Already, your mind is falling into the familiar thought patterns of a veteran commander. Facing a force this big and this powerful is a daunting prospect. How do you plan on fighting this battle? We are doing as much damage as possible. A new message appears on your comms window. It's from the Imperial flagship. You have no doubt that it is the same message being transmitted to every ship and combat armature in the Codex Task Force. The speaker is a grim-looking, block-jawed man at the end of middle age. His skin hangs in tired bags under his green eyes, his face is covered with scars, and his gray hair is cut very close to the scalp. It is clear that this man has been a soldier for a very long time. This is Star Marshal Nicholas Steele, commander of the Imperial Grand Fleet, he begins, his voice a wary baritone, as if it had been as if he had repeated this speech 100 times before. In the name of the Empress and the rightful government of the 16 worlds of the humanity ascendant, I order you to recant your treason against the throne. Those who surrender will be shown mercy. A moment later, your own side offers a response. This is Captain Artemisia Balin, commander of the Caliburn Battle Group. You see the Imperial commander's eyes widen in recognition. If you know who I am, then you know my answer. We will never surrender. The Imperial gives a resigned sigh. You never do, he mutters. Then the line goes dead. A few seconds later, the Imperial carriers begin spitting out silvery specks from their hangar bays. The enemy have begun deploying their own combat armatures. One by one, the enemy mecha begin heading to positions in front of the Imperial fleet. Soon, there will be over 200 of them, slowly advancing in a single massive wall as the gaps in their formations are filled by more and more enemy machines. Oddly enough, while the enemy mecha are advancing, the Imperial warships hold steady behind them. Normally, common sense would dictate that the Imperial fleet's combat armatures would be deployed directly in front of the fleet's ships, so that mecha and warship could remain in range of each other's weapons and mutually support each other. However, the Imperials have deployed their vast force of combat armatures in front of their ships. The Imperial mecha regain a formidable force, a gargantuan formation of versatile Fantins, swift Valiers, deadly Grognards, and long-ranged Volol bombardment armatures. However, without support from their own ships, the Imperial pilots would have to attack the Kodak force on their own. The fact that the Imperial machines aren't being supported by their warships means that the latter will be hard-pressed to assist their combat armatures. Does Steele expect his pilots to face this battle themselves? Is he a coward, just trying to keep his own flag and ship out of danger? I believe last time we did the he's got something up his sleeve route, so we won't do that again. Let's call him a coward in hopes that it gives us the option to go massacre people. Sure. While the plan behind the Imperial fleet's deployment may not be clear to you, the motives driving the man who ordered it are rank cowardice, pure and simple. Imperial military doctrine already demands that the fleet commander place himself in the position of greatest safety possible, which is why the Imperial flag officers often fly their flags from heavily armored dreadnoughts as opposed to faster, more lightly protected carriers that Kodak admirals and task force commanders prefer. For the commander of an Imperial Grand Fleet to be so terrified of facing combat that he must move his flagship and escorts even further from the line of contact demonstrates a pusillanimity beyond any senior officer you have ever seen. By keeping his ship so far back from the forward line, the Imperial Star Marshal has compromised the effectiveness of his force for the sake of keeping his own miserable hide safe. You wonder how such a coward was appointed to such a high command in the first place. That doesn't bode well. We're walking into a trap. Another message on the channel reserved for your lands this time. Zaf 2 reporting. Looks like we're all here. Oh, wait, that's a Sadie. Zaf 2 reporting. Looks like we're all here. A Sadie looks tired. Your wingman's eyes are bloodshot and her hair is disordered under her flight helmet. Sadie and the rest of your lands had returned to Caliburn 4 hours after you had, without losses, but exhausted. With every pilot needed for the coming battle, they had gone through the same emergency detox process you had, with the sole difference being the fact that they got even less sleep than you. It's more than that, though. You know your wingman well enough to know something is weighing on her. You tried asking her about it as you waited for your orders in the briefing room, but she responded only with an absent-minded promise to tell you later. You take a look at your tactical display to make sure everything in your unit is formed up and ready to go. Chief Weaver had installed the IFF data package as soon as you landed, providing the Lionheart's computer with the capability to recognize and display friendly and hostile contacts. Zaft Lance, let's move into position. Your unit's machines fall in behind yours as you continue to move towards the main fleet of the Codec combat armatures. As you approach, some of your allies shift to allow you and your subordinates to take up positions. As the commanding officer of the most elite lance on your side, you are expected to take the brunt of the enemy's attack and to position yourself where the Imperial forces are likely to be the strongest. Then again, as the commander on the spot, you are the one who will decide exactly where your unit is needed most. Your Imperial counterparts continue to advance as you and your lance take up your positions. Hundreds of enemy machines begin making their ponderous way towards you. Their warships remain stoic, far behind them. Closer and closer, the immense Imperial formation approaches. Your own formation remains still, weapons at the ready, but unmoving, lest you or your allies step out of the zone of protection offered by your fleet's guns. The soundlessness of space makes every second feel like an eternity. A noiseless hell as your two formations slowly approach the maximum effective range of your weapons. Suddenly, the Imperial formation seems to explode. Enemy machines fly out in every direction like fireworks, each point of light armed each point of lightly armed each point of light armed with enough firepower to level a small city. Friendly comm channels fill with confused chatter, but a second later, before anyone can react, the Imperials reassemble with perfectly drilled spontaneity. Out of this seemingly unordered mass of Imperial combat armatures comes two separate formations. The smaller group is a loose gaggle of fast, agile machines, Villiers and Grognards. They head towards and above the Codec combat armature screen. Their obvious target is the Caliburn and the other Codec warships. The second formation is much larger and much tighter. This group makes its way to the side, away from the Codec fleet and towards the civilian transports. Even at this distance, you can see the telltale silhouettes of bulky, ungainly machines at the center of the force, M403 Vols. Their massive volley of tiny, short-ranged missiles fired from their bulky, shoulder-mounted launchers can barely scratch armor, but against unprotected targets they are deadly. Both the task force and the transports will need your help. The Revol's swarm missiles will tear the unprotected transports apart. While the warship's heavy armor might shrug off those missiles and cannon fire, they offer no protection against the infinitely sharp blades of the monosabers carried by the Villiers and Grognards. What are your orders? We're given these orders. We're defending the ship. To hell with the civilians. Who cares? Their cries for vengeance will spark war anew. You inform your unit of the decision. All right, Zaft Lance, we're going to fall back and offer close support to the battle group's warships. Sadie raises an objection almost instantly. With all due respect, she says, we should be taking the fight to the enemy. We can stop them before they have a chance to hit our ships. You shake your head. We're falling back, Sadie. Those are my orders, and I'm still in command here. Yeah, I would do that if that's what I would do. But anyway, your wingman grits her teeth in frustration, but doesn't object further. You and the rest of your Zaft Lance aren't the only people withdrawing to the rear. 4 other lances, 24 Grangers and Reiters in all, fall back to the warships with you. 2 of those units quickly form a defensive perimeter, but the other 2 lances don't stop when they reach the forward ships of the battle group. It seems your fellow pilots are more motivated by fear of the massive enemy force than any tactical plan. You take a look at your options as you take position. The most obvious course of action would be to set an ambush, either setting up a kill zone with your ranged weapons, or hiding in the sensor shadows of the warship, catching your enemy by surprise when they get close. Alternatively, you could help defend your allies by marking targets for the missile launchers and heavy guns of the Caliburn and her escorts. If you had the will and piloting ability to risk getting closer to the enemy, you could offer fire computer controls of the Codec warships with far better target locks than they'd normally get. Lastly, you could try and rally your fleeing allies. Maybe a few inspiring words can put the fighting spirit back in your fellow Codec pilots. What do you do? Oh, I like the idea of an ambush. Long range ambush? I kind of like the idea of painting the sky with lasers, but I'd rather do the killing myself. With your unit, you quickly set up a workable plan to catch the incoming enemies in a crossfire as they begin their attack run against the ships of your battle group. The initial impact of your ambush and the ultimate amount of damage that it can deal to the enemy relies on your ability to seek out the angles of attack. Ideally, you'd want to hit the enemy from as many directions as possible. The more angles of attack you can find, the more angles the enemy formation will have to cover, and the fewer escape routes the enemy will have open. Thankfully, your years of experience have given you the hard-won knowledge of exactly what kind of ambush to set. You divide your lance into three elements, one positioned above the allied warships, one below, and one on either side of the formation. That way, any enemy that attempts to close in to attack your battle group's warships will be caught in a three-dimensional crossfire. With your enemy when your unit reaches their position, you give the order to power down, making your machines invisible to sensors and difficult to spot with the naked eye from several thousand meters away. With your machine powered down and everything in readiness, there's nothing left to do but wait for the enemy. The moments seem to drag out an eternity. You count down the last few seconds before the Imperial formation enters your lance's weapon range. You inhale slowly, letting the tension of the cockpit flow through your body, mist in your lungs, and be exhaled again. The lead element of the Imperial formation moves into range. Your fingers dart into action, keying in the commands that will power up your combat armature. Zaft Lance, go, go, go! Your tactical display lights up with the signatures of your lancemates. The tension thickens as you wait for the last few seconds before your weapons and thrusters power up fully. The Imperials continue their final approach towards the Caliburn and her escorts, unsuspecting. Your particle rifle powers up. You bring it up to firing position as quickly as an epiphany. Your hands tighten as you bring your weapon to bear against the unsuspecting enemy target. Fire! Your barked order almost drowns out the shuddering recoil of your own weapon. The pilots of Zaft Lance squeeze their triggers in the same cataclysmic moment. The enemy formation explodes into distant elements as the Valiers and Grognards come under fire not only by the expected point defenses of the Kodak battle group, but by unsuspected fire from all sides. The space around the battle group's ship is quickly lit up by what appears to be a vast swarm of fireflies. Autocannon and particle rifles spit a torrent of defiance at the enemy in their midst. Unfortunately, the enthusiasm of you and your allies does not make your fire any more precise or accurate. Despite the element of surprise, you and your lancemates' fire mostly goes wild. First blood goes to the battle group's point defense guns. Aww. While a few of the Imperial machines are brought down by your frantic defensive fire, many more are able to make their attack runs against the battle group. Despite your best efforts, the Kodak warships are battered, overwhelmed, and destroyed by their attackers, one by one. Wow. Finally, after an eternity of seemingly ineffective defense, the Imperials withdraw. Only then the Caliburn remains intact, her battered hull venting atmosphere from a few dozen plates, her guns crumpled, and her armors cratered with pockmarks. It is only by a miracle that she is still holding together and under her own power. It is the only thing keeping your failure from being a complete disaster. Whoo boy. Wow, that went well. You take a few seconds to watch the enemy combat armatures retreat back to the fleet and catch your breath as your lance forms up with you again. With your ammunition and fuel reserves running low, you doubt you'll fare particularly well against a renewed attack. The cost of the battle has been high. While your own machine has suffered minimal damage, your lancemates' machines have all taken damage, to some extent or another, and you can't be sure how much. With your own attention so focused on keeping your machine in one piece, you have little ability to keep track of your lance. At least you're all still alive. Aww. The Kodak battle group is not so lucky. Though a stout defense has saved most of the ships of the battle group, one of its destroyers has been cut apart by the swift machines of the Imperial attack force. In addition, almost every ship remaining has suffered some kind of damage or other. The Caliburn herself is streaming atmosphere from two hull breaches in her bow, and her fire control mast has been reduced to a crumpled ruin. The civilian ships are in bad shape. The Imperial attack has managed to destroy or disable almost all of the civilian transports. Only three of the large, ungainly vessels are still under their own power. Understandably, they are headed away from the battle as fast as their overburdened drives will let them. The Imperial machines are long gone, fallen back to their massed warships, no bigger than an array of specks on your main display. For a moment, it seems the enemy fleet is actually moving forward to meet their retreating combat armatures. Wait, you take a second look. Instead of retreating to their carriers, the tiny dark dots of the Imperial machines are taking up standard defensive positions around the enemy warships. Your pilot suit suddenly feels clammy as it fills with cold sweat. The Imperial Grand Fleet is advancing. There is no way that the battered Kodak battle group could survive against the full force of the Imperial Grand Fleet. It barely survived an attack by a third of the Imperial Grand Fleet's combat armatures, and this time, the Mecha will be supported by the heavy weaponry of the Imperial warships. Now, with the civilian ships out of the picture, you can see no reason why the Imperial fleet would divert its attention this time. As much as you hate to admit it, you know it would be hopeless to try and stand against an attack this big. Sure enough, the order you've been waiting for isn't long in coming. Zaft Lead, this is Caliburn. Return to the ship and prepare to withdraw. We're getting out of here while we still can. Acknowledging your orders, you turn back to your enemy and order your weary lads to retreat. Try not to turn back and look at the receding blue planet behind you. Whew! So we kept most of our warships intact, which is nice, and we sacrificed all sorts of civilian lives to do so. Also nice. Next time, episode 6. But for now, later.